Hi folks, it's Mark Smith with Family Tree Counseling, and I have a long and I think interesting video today. I got to tell you, I'm a little tired, and what's left of Hurricane Irma is floating through our town right now, and it's not dangerous, nothing's being damaged, but it's sort of freaky. So you might hear the wind kick up as I talk, but I'm heading out of town on a little vacation. Going to go see my daughter, and there was something just talking to me. I wanted to get it off my chest and get it onto video before I take off. So, minding my own business, trying not to make videos, and I have a therapy session with a wonderful client of mine who is, I'm not going to say exactly where he's from, but he's from Russia. And really bright young man, constantly reading books. And he had shared with me about a book called It Didn't Start With You: How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle, by Mark Wolynn. And I've been a therapist for about a million years, and I had never heard the name of that book before. And my man in Russia, sometimes he reads really brilliant books, and sometimes my experience is he reads books I wish he wouldn't be reading, and they take him down paths I wish it wouldn't go. And he started into saying something along the lines of he'd been reading this book, and to him, his interpretation of the book was, you'll be physically ill if you're angry with your parents or emotionally cut off from your parents. And then he wondered if maybe he should fake it and be nice when he calls his mom, because his mom is sort of self-centered and oblivious and doesn't really converse. So, of course, my antenna was going off. So during the session, I actually looked up the description of the book, and it sounded pretty right on. It sounded like brilliant. So I'm going to read the description of the book, and then I'm going to talk about the book, and then I'm going to discuss some things. So this is dedicated to my man in Russia. Thank you for bringing this interesting book to my attention, and I'm sort of going to dissect it from a therapist point of view and from a working with you folks out there who have been narcissistically abused point of view, because I think that's a different point of view than, your average bear. So the description in Amazon called it a groundbreaking approach to, the name of the video, transforming traumatic legacies passed down in families over generations. So he writes, the evidence is compelling. Depression, anxiety, chronic pain, phobias, obsessive thoughts. The roots of these difficulties may not reside in our immediate life experience or in chemical imbalances in our brains, but in fact they might exist in the lives of our parents, our grandparents, and even our great-grandparents. The latest scientific research, now making headlines, supports that many have long intuited, that traumatic experience can be passed down through generations. So I'm off the quote, I'll be back to the quote. Doesn't that suck? That not only do we have to worry about our own trauma, but we might have also been experiencing trauma from previous generations. Oh my God. In It Didn't Start With You, the author builds on the work of leading experts in PTSD, including Mount Sinai School of Medicine neuroscientist Rachel Yehuda and psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk, the author of The Body Keeps the Score, great book. Even if the person who suffered the original trauma has died, or if the story has been forgotten or silenced, memory and feelings can live on. Part of what interested me in this concept is I just learned some interesting facts about my father. I've shared in the videos before that my father's mother was 14 years old when she gave birth to my father, and I always figured that it was a classmate, that somebody in junior high had impregnated my grandmother, but my sister, I'll share some more, she found out that it was a 24-year-old man and my grandmother was 11 when she was impregnated. And I'll get into it in a little bit. So it really was, my father was a result of rape. And I think that resonates with me, just this trauma being passed down through generations. It explains a lot of things. I'll come back to what I found out from my sister. With DNA and with Ancestry.com, we're able to learn a whole lot more about where we came from and who we are. These emotional legacies are often hidden, encoded in everything from gene expression to everyday language, and they play a far greater role in our emotional and physical health than has ever been understood. As a pioneer in the field of inherited family trauma, Mark Wolynn has worked with individuals and groups on the therapeutic level for over 20 years. It Didn't Start With You offers a pragmatic and descriptive guide to his method, the core language approach. Diagnostic self-inventories provide a way to uncover the fears and anxieties conveyed through everyday words, behaviors, and physical symptoms. Techniques for developing a genogram. Family tree counseling is all based on the use of a genogram. That's what we do. And whenever somebody is sitting in front of us, we don't see a couple, we see 4 generations of people at least. And we get those 4 generations of people on our genogram. Developing a genogram or extended family tree to create a map of experiences going back through generations. And visualization, active imagination, and direct dialogue create pathways to reconnection, integration, and reclaiming life and health. It Didn't Start With You is a transformative approach to resolving long-standing difficulties that in many cases traditional therapy, drugs, or other interventions have not had the capacity to touch. So, folks, if you're a family tree counseling follower, if you're a Mark Smith follower, I strongly recommend this book, It Didn't Start With You. This is the most fascinating book I've read in years. I was stunned by the insight in this book. Now, having said that, for those of you who are recently shattered, don't read it. For those of you with strongly malignant narcissistic parents, I disagree with the fella's conclusions, and you will too, because he's like, make peace, make nice with your parents. And what we know is we may want to make peace, we may want to make nice, but some people are beyond redemption. Some people are beyond the ability to have empathy or kindness or be able to hear and listen. And if you open up your heart to an active malignant narcissist, you're liable to get re-injured. But having said that, I'm telling you, this is a fascinating book, and I strongly recommend it. Let me tell you a story from the book. He tells a story about a 19-year-old man who, when he turned 19, he couldn't sleep. He all of a sudden could not get a decent night's sleep, and he started to be very cold and depressed. And nobody could figure out what was going on. The doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. And so he goes into this therapist, and they find out that there was an uncle who, when he was 19 years old, uh, he was lost in the cold and he froze to death when he was 19 years old. And when the jump was made to, and the 19-year-old man didn't know about that. And this may sound far-fetched, but I'm telling you, folks, there's something to it. So he was reenacting the wounding and the trauma of his uncle. And there's a whole lot more of that going on than what we know. Jerry Wise, who isn't with Family Tree, currently he is on our channel. Brilliant man, brilliant life coach. And he drew a lot of his theories from Murray Bowen. And all Jerry's videos talk about the inherent danger in cutting off from your family system. We might think that, if we live somewhere that it might be better to move to California. If you're on the East Coast, get as far away from your parents as you can. But the guy that Jerry gets a lot of his theory from, and Family Tree is really based on, is a guy named Murray Bowen, a 1950s family theorist. He says you do better to individuate if you go hang out with your family. Now, again, many of us can't do that. And I know this is going to be a controversial video, and please don't send a bunch of negative comments telling me I'm off base. I know about no contact. I don't want you to endanger yourself, but not everybody has a malignant narcissist for a parent. And I just, if you can do some work on your family of origin stuff, it can do some powerful things for you. I spent 4 years in a dialogue with both my mother and my father, confronting them, and I know it loosened a whole lot of stuff up in me. And I got some feedback from my mother that was very, very important. So let me tell the story of what my sister uncovered through DNA testing. My sister got a hit with my dad's cousin. Her father is a man named Nick Fratto, Fratto, and his brother was Sam Fratto. And then my sister figured out the rest on Ancestry.com. So I got this as I was listening to this book, shooting baskets here by the beach on Saturday. This is what I got this text from my sister. She says, I did more research on the family tree and it's kind of depressing. Turns out our Italian paternal grandfather, DNA donor, was a criminal. He was sentenced to prison in 1938 for statutory rape. He was 24 years old when he got Cora pregnant in 1931 when she was 11 years old. Can you imagine if a 24-year-old man now got an 11-year-old pregnant, 11-year-old woman pregnant, a girl pregnant? He would be in jail so fast and so long that, but back then, nobody said a thing. He was 24, she was 11. And then in 1938, he did go to jail for statutory rape. We saw the records. So his name was Sam Fratto. So Cora, my grandmother, didn't tell anybody who he was, but she named her son, my father, after him. My dad's name is Samuel Francis. And I haven't told my brother yet, but my little brother Sam, he named after my dad, and he's named after this criminal rapist. I don't know how to tell him. So he was arrested again in 1952 with two others, and a police officer for robbery, a $138,000 heist where they pistol whipped a woman. However, charges were dropped due to a lack of evidence. There was a lot of this is my sister writing this. She says there was a lot of competition in the household that my grandmother grew up in. Her parents were raising two of my dad's cousins, as well as my dad's, as well as their 4 or 5 children. And I've made a video before saying my grandmother was a conniver. It's a conniver and a sneaky person added together and you get a conniver. When I was doing research on my father, there was some long lost uncle who told me that my grandmother was a conniver. She was a liar, a manipulator, a user. She was a narcissist. So that was quite a lot to handle. That my dad was a product of statutory rape, and he grew up as the stepchild, the unwanted child, with a abusive, neglectful, manipulative mother. So and then I grew up and avoided who my type, which was my mother, a conniver, a borderline. But in midlife, I involved myself with a really scary, hurtful narcissist. And she was a conniver. She was a con woman. She was a sex addict. She was a liar. And it just about killed me. But I was reenacting my dad's father was a conniver and a criminal. His mother was a conniver. My mother was a conniver, and I was doomed to reenact what had been going on in my family system for generations. So here's the sentence in the book that I sort of disagree with. He says, it's essential to make peace with our parents. And to do so not only brings us inner peace, but it allows for harmony to spread into generations that follow. By softening towards our parents and dropping the story that stands in the way, we are more likely to halt the repetition of senseless generational suffering. Now, I didn't really disagree with that. That all is true and right. But what if your parent is a malignant narcissist? Should you go to them with your heart wide open, saying, "Mommy, Daddy, let's make peace"? Hell no. This entire book, they didn't mention having narcissistic people in the world and narcissistic parents. He always focused on the underlying wounds of the parent. And I'm sure all narcissists have underlying wounds. That doesn't mean that we should expose ourselves to them continually. So for somebody with a malignant narcissist for a parent, this is a wrong paradigm and it's dangerous. But for most people, it's a brilliant paradigm and it holds a lot of truth. And if you're wrestling with this dilemma of what do I do with my parents, I've done a video before on the great therapist Alice Miller's book, The Body Never Lies, where she talks about the commandment, the 4th commandment, thou shalt honor thy father and mother. That doesn't mean that you dishonor yourself and put yourself in harm's way uh, by trusting somebody who should not be trusted. So what am I saying here, folks? I keep going back and forth and back and forth. What I'm saying is being bitter towards your parents is damaging to you. Holding any kind of bitterness is like holding hot coals in your palms. Bitterness is cancer for the soul. So you may not it may not be safe for you to work on your relationship directly with your parent, but you can work on it indirectly within yourself so that you come to grips. I have this process that I tell clients of working through issues with your parents, and the purpose of it is to heal you. It's the cake. The icing on the cake is if you happen to build some bridges and heal some wounds between you and your parents. But the first thing is realization. It's realizing who your parents were, who your grandparents were. God, I didn't know that my grandmother was 11 years old and was statutory raped. My poor father. He was just fed upon by narcissists his whole life. The second thing that's important is to have the feelings related to the truth. Feel the sadness, feel the anger. But the third thing then is confrontation. And if you're in no contact, you can't go confront your narcissistic parents. If you don't resolve these issues, you know what you guys are going to do? You know what I did? We go out and pick somebody to fall in love with who's a carbon copy of the narcissists that have been plaguing our families for generations. So I'm just talking about cutting out the middleman or cutting out the middle woman and working directly on your family of origin issues so you don't have to marry a narcissist to work on your issues with your parents. So I spent 4 years confronting my parents. I made some headway with my mother where she would own some things and apologize. And it led to the letter that she sent me that explained my situation. It is really getting stormy out there. But I didn't make a lot of progress with my father, but I still, the fourth step in the process is resolving. And I took a motorcycle trip to Butler, Pennsylvania, and I met with my father's siblings after his death. And by learning more about my father from his siblings, something shifted in me and I made some peace. So there may be things lurking in the history of your family 2 and 3 and 4 generations back that have everything to do with why you keep picking a narcissist and why you continuing to have the symptoms of PTSD. So I just encourage you to get this book, Mark Wolynn, It Didn't Start With You. Brilliant book. Of course, we know that as recovering people from narcissistic abuse, many of us cannot expose ourselves to somebody that dangerous. So you're not going to have the conversation with your parents, but you do need to heal the wound. You need to heal the wound within yourself. So that's all I had to say today. So I'm going to take a little nap and head off to Denver, and you all may not hear from me for a little bit. Visit us on Tuesday night, our live stream. My lovely wife, Brenda, is handling that for a while, and bring questions to that. Read this book that I recommended. I have a book on narcissistic abuse recovery that you can download from our website. It's called The Alchemist. We turn narcissistic abuse into gold. And that's what recovery is about. It's about turning the wounds of our childhood and the wounds of our narcissistic abuse into thriving and blessing. So thank you for watching today. God bless everybody out there who's been impacted by these hurricanes. Let's pray for our country and pitch in and help where we can. So thank you for watching.